Craig Petty, let's talk about Visible. I don't know about you, but a lot of people have been asking me questions about this. How about you? You've been getting like messages like crazy about this damn thing?
It launched when I was in the middle of a gig, and I came out and I had literally about 40 messages and comments on YouTube and questions, and it's like, oh my god, this is mental. Yeah, I've had a lot of people reaching out to me and commenting, and I think that D. Christopher in the 1914, they do such a good job with the production values that people have watched the trailer and they're like, oh my god, tell me more, I want to know more. So yeah, it's been a bit crazy, to be perfectly honest.
Well, and we're going to jump into the craziness. I've been looking at questions. It's funny because some of the questions I had lined up for you are also questions you've been seeing on your own YouTube channel. So this will be pretty easy because this stuff's already been floating around in your head. So let's just jump on in. Let's do this. So the first question I have is, we all know, pretty much every magician knows what an invisible deck is. But what is the Visible project? Because obviously there's some overlap here, but what is the Visible project? What is this?
I mean, the Visible project is basically all about the Invisible Deck. And here's the thing. Everybody has been doing the Invisible Deck the exact same way for as long back as we can remember. Like, everybody does it the same way. You get into Magic, and one of the first things that you're told to buy is an Invisible Deck. You then learn the standard presentation that everybody does, and you either go out and do that presentation until you retire it from your act, or you put it in the bottom drawer because everybody else is doing the same thing. And one thing that I talk about on my channel is being unique and trying to do something different and trying to make it something unique for yourself. So many years ago, I sat down with the Invisible Deck, and that's the thing with this, Luke. This isn't stuff that I've come up with for the project. It's like, right, let's do something with the Invisible Deck. Let me think of 15 routines that I can do with this. Right, I can make some money out of these ideas. This is stuff that I've been doing for like 10 or 15 years. And I thought, how can we actually take the Invisible Deck and take it to the next level? And that's what the project is all about. It's saying, okay, we all know what an Invisible Deck is, but how can we apply this to other concepts in Magic? Can we do a cards across with an Invisible Deck? Can we do a multiple selection with an Invisible Deck? Can we do a confabulation with an Invisible Deck? And if we would, how would that look? So that now, rather than just going out and doing the exact same performance that you see every other magician do, we're doing it in a completely different way. And the thing that I always say to people is, and Michael O'Brien summed this up perfectly. When he saw the project, he said, if I didn't know ahead of time that this was about the Invisible Deck, every single one of these routines would have fooled me. And that's the point. People that are watching this probably wouldn't even realize the Invisible Deck was in play. Now, that's not to say that we can't do the classic Invisible Deck, but turn it on its head. So there's a routine on the project called Future Craig, which is the classic Invisible Deck, where one card turns over in the deck, but rather than just, hey, it's an Invisible Deck, hey, it's more about you talking to yourself in the future. And in the middle of your performance, you get a phone call from your future self telling you the information that you need during the and it's such a weird concept, but I've had people ring up genuinely and book me and say, are you the guy that I met at the gig that was talking to himself in the future? I'm like, yeah, that's me. So basically what it is, it's just about what can we do with the Invisible Deck that will allow us to think outside the box. So that's basically what it is.
Hold on a sec. I'm getting a call here. Craig, it's you. Wait, it's Future Craig. Wait a second. I'm still doing the chat with you. Yeah. I'll catch up with you later. All right. Future Craig. All right.
There you go. I get around.
So, what was it that made you look at the Invisible Deck in a different way? We know what this is about, but what was it that made you go, here's a standard prop, here's something everyone does, everyone uses. Is that what made you do this? Was you wanted to do something different with it, or was it something else that made you even want to do this project like this?
Two things that happened at the same time. And the first thing was I was trying to come up with a cards across. And I had certain conditions that I wanted. I wanted a cards across that could work in the real world. I wanted it to be instantly reset. I wanted it to be examinable. I wanted the spectator to deal the cards out, the 10 cards. I wanted them to hold on to them with no palming. I wanted 3 other people to think of cards from the deck. and I wanted them to very cleanly vanish with no palming and appear under the spectator's hand, and it's the 3 cards they thought of. I tried to come up with a whole bunch of methods, and I was sitting there, and I had an invisible deck on my my table from finishing a gig, and I was like, hang on a minute, could I apply that to this? Would that work? That was the first catalyst. Then the second was, I went to a gig, and I was performing for the clients at the client's table, and I was doing the classic invisible deck handling. Hey, invisible deck, blah, blah, blah. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a classic for a reason. It works. And I was doing that, and afterwards the client came over to me and he went, oh yeah, you were great. Really like you. Wonderful. I've seen about 4 or 5 other magicians do that invisible deck thing.
Oh, okay.
And it was like, man, if I'm trying to stand out here, why would he want to book me? Why would he want to book me over any of those other 4 or 5 guys when I'm doing exactly the same trick as them? So I had that, and I was thinking, right, I'm going to take the invisible deck out of my repertoire now. And at the same time, I was doing this cards across thing, and I then I came up with this. That was the first routine I came up with the invisible deck. It's called a cross. It's on the project. And then I started doing that exclusively with the invisible deck for a while, killing with it. And I was like, well, hang on a minute. If I can do a cards across with an invisible deck, what else can I do with an invisible deck? And it was at that time, and I did a lot of research. And so Jay Sankey came out with a project many years ago, and he had some wonderful ideas on there. My friend Eric Stevens has had some really good ideas as well. And I was looking at all of these things, and I was like, well, what else can I do with it? And over time, the routines that you now see on the Visible product kind of just came to the forefront. But the original was wanting to retire the invisible deck and trying to come up with this cards across.
And on the project, though, you're not just teaching original routines. You mentioned to me before we started talking that also at the beginning of this, you give some background with the original invisible deck. I'll let you tell what else, because there were some really good tips that you were telling me that you shared, like the first 45 minutes, the care of the deck and all that. Like, what else are you teaching besides just the routines?
I wanted this to be almost like a masterclass on the invisible deck.
Right.
And I didn't want it to be about, hey, here's some really fun and funky tricks you can do with the invisible deck. Although that's cool, I wanted it to be more than that. I wanted it to get everybody who watches it really excited about using the invisible deck. So because we wanted it as a bit of a masterclass, it starts off with the crediting behind the invisible deck, the origin of the invisible deck, where it came from. I then go into the classic routine. So I perform the classic routine just in case people haven't seen it and they don't know what that classic routine is I'm talking about. I perform that. I go through why it works. We talk about all of the classic gags. No, open up the box. We go through all of that stuff. And then before we filmed the project, I reached out to several magicians and I said, do you use an invisible deck? Why not? Or if you do, what would you like me to cover? And I had a list of questions, and in the first section, we cover as many of those as we can. And one of the big reasons I found from polling a whole bunch of magicians, one of the big reasons people don't use an invisible deck is because they're scared of the maths that are that's inherent with the invisible deck. So it's kind of like, and I can understand why, because if you're in a stressful situation, especially if you're a new performer, it's like, right, okay, they've picked the 6 of diamonds. So the 6 of diamonds is it's hearts, isn't it? It's hearts, right? Okay. And then 6 away from 13 is 7 of hearts. So what have I got to look? 7, was it diamonds or hearts? 7 of hearts. Okay, so now I've got to spread. And it's kind of like you get yourself confused, and we've all been there where we've got the wrong card. Well, I share a way that I actually use the invisible deck that brings everything up to your face, which means it's absolutely perfect for mix and mingle and bigger situations. But you're never having to worry about. There's no maths in the way that I do an invisible deck. There's no memory work. There's no second guessing yourself. You literally just spread out and you show the correct card. So we go through that. We go through, we've all seen those performers that have made their own invisible deck, and it is literally glued together. They've used so much roughing material that you could build a house with these cards, right? We briefly talk about, making sure it's the right consistency, so it's not too rough, it's not too smooth, it's just right, and we go through everything. So it's not just about the tricks, although the tricks are really good. The idea, and you can skip that stuff. So if you're already an experienced invisible deck user and you don't care about any of that, great, just go into the tricks. But if you're new to Magic, or you've never used an invisible deck because you're worried about it, or you're worried about the mathematics, or you're worried about the handling, or whatever it may be, or the angles, or whatever else, or what situation can it or can't it work in, we go through all of that.
What's included with this? Do you get the decks? Do you get a deck? Like, what do you get when you purchase the Visible Project?
You get two invisible decks with it. Mm-hmm. You get a red deck and you get a blue deck. So you get two invisible decks and you get a 4.5 hour download.
Wait, 4.5 hours?
4.5 hours, yeah. We when Dee was putting this project together, he shared with me a screenshot of his hard drive, and it's over 1 terabyte when he was rendering it out. Like, it's ridiculous. One thing that people have asked me is, why are you getting two decks? I've already got an invisible deck. I don't need an invisible deck. Why are you giving me two invisible decks? The reason is, arguably, 4 of the strongest routines on the project, or at least in my opinion, require you to write on the back of the cards. So you have to prepare the invisible deck in a way that allows you to do it. It's set up to do with a particular routine, if that kind of makes sense. So there's a killer ACAN on there, and rather than being any card at any number, it's any number on any card. And the idea is the spectator thinks of a number, genuinely doesn't tell you, no force. They then use that number to select a playing card, and again, it's not a force. They can literally end up on any card. So they're thinking of a freely chosen card, they're thinking of a freely chosen number, and before any of this began, somebody was holding onto a deck in their hand. You take the deck back, and you tell them at the beginning, you've turned 1 card over in this deck, and you've got a prediction there. Without knowing, genuinely, you don't know the card or the number, you spread through the deck that they've been holding. There's 1 card turned over, face down, and written on the back of it is the number they're thinking of. And when you turn the card round, it's the card they're thinking of. And it's killer. Jamie Dawes said that it's like his favorite trick of the whole project. That requires the invisible deck to be set up in a particular way that means that you could only use the invisible deck for that project. And every time I've lectured on the stuff with the invisible deck that I do, because I've done this at lectures for a while now, you end up with people going out and buying a couple of invisible decks because they're like, oh, like that, I'm going to need an invisible deck to prep for this, and I'm going to need an invisible deck to prep for that. And Louis Lavelle, who was there on the shoot on the day, he went away and he ordered like 4 invisible decks to do to make some of the routines up. So it's like we're including the decks because you're going to want to order these anyway. Gotcha. So because you're going to want to get them anyway, let's give them with you. And also, if you haven't got an invisible deck, and also they're the perfect invisible deck. So it's not like a homemade botch job that is not going to work. They're so loose that you can't actually stick them together, or they're so stuck. It's the perfect invisible deck, so you know what the consistency is meant to be, if that makes sense. So you get the 2 decks with it, 1 red, 1 blue.
What kind of routines are you learning here? Like, do you have to sit at a table? Because I know in the trailer you're sitting at a table quite a bit. Are these table tricks? Are these walk-around things that you could do? Is it a mixture of everything? Like, what are the types of routines that you're learning here?
None of them require a table. I'm sitting down at a table because this was shot as we were coming out of lockdown, and the table kept me separate from the people I was performing for. Yeah. And when I was performing for groups of 3 or 4 people, and they were in their own bubbles, but I was kind of separate away from them, and that table gave me that kind of 2 meter kind of distance. That's why the table was there, to be perfectly honest, because we didn't want to take the cheap route of just going in a studio and just performing these to camera. We wanted live performances. We spent a day getting live performances, but it meant that we had to be kind of careful in terms of how we shot that. So that's why the table's there, and you can absolutely do it on a table. They're designed for the real world, so no, you don't need a close-up pad for any of these routines. You don't need a table for any of these routines. They're all designed to be walk around. They're all designed to be mix and mingle. There's no real angle considerations. You can do them stand up. There's several of the routines you can actually do for parlor or for cabaret. So my opening routine in cabaret is included in the project, which is a routine where you have somebody think of a celebrity, and you say to them, if you were thinking of that, I couldn't possibly know who that celebrity is, but if you had to guess, what would their favorite card be? and they tell you, and you go, okay, cool. And then the deck they've been holding the whole time, you spread through, and there's one card turned over, and it's the card that they named, but then their celebrity is written on the other side of the card.
Nice, that's great.
Really, really cool moment. Also, I mean, one of my favorite magicians in the whole world, we spent a lot of time with the crediting on this project. And something that I've done for a long time is a triumph with an invisible deck. And I use it in my cabaret show, and it's a thought of triumph that's designed to be done stand up, but you can do it close up with no sleight of hand skill at all. You literally just take the cards, shuffle them face up into face down. It's the best triumph you'd ever see. But when we were working on the crediting for this whole thing, we found it was very similar to a routine that Steve Bedwell put out. He brought out this thing called Shake and Bake with the pot noodle packs. Yeah. And it was very similar to what I was doing. And I wanted to include the triumph on the project, but I didn't want to, obviously it was too close to what Steve was doing. So I reached out to Steve and I said, hey, Steve, how you doing? Hope you're well. Can we include this on the project? This is my version. And he said, yeah, go ahead, by all means. So I got Steve Bedwell's blessing to perform and explain that as well, which was great. And if you know that routine, Luke, I mean, it is the perfect triumph for stand-up situations. So I mean, that's just incredible on there. So it's all walk around. It's all mix and mingle. There's 2 or 3 routines that can work on stage, but they can also be done sort of close up and mix and mingle as well. But yeah, there's nothing that actually requires a table or a close-up pad or anything like that. I mean, the bottom line is, the whole idea behind this is that I'm presenting on this project routines and concepts that people can take and put into their own act. But what I really hope is that people watch this and they think to themselves, well, okay, it is possible to take something that everybody has done exactly the same way for all these years and take it in a completely different direction. And hopefully, my hope is that people are going to be coming up to me at future Magic conventions. They're going to be going, hey, let me show you what I do with Invisible Deck. I'd love that. I'd absolutely love that. Nice. And hopefully it'll kickstart some people's creativity, which would be great. But yeah, this is everything I know and I do with the Invisible Deck. And hopefully at the end of it, I'm going to have a lot more people that are going. We've taken everybody who's worried about using the Invisible Deck, and we've showed them that that's not a problem at all, and we've given them a whole bunch of routines that they can go out and they can do that are commercial. And that's the thing, Luke. I'm a commercial magician. I go out and I perform all the time. So everything that I ever do has to be commercial. It has to be something that works in the real world. It's not a pipe dream. It's not something that only works from a 45-degree angle, standing on one leg, closing your left eye and squinting. It's not something that's designed to be done on social media. Not that there's anything wrong with that. This is designed to actually be gone and done, as Paul Green would say, in the trenches. That's where all this comes from.
But before I let you get out of here, Mr. Craig Petty, and I know it's after midnight where you are, so thank you for staying up late. Each week I talk to my guest and I have them ask a question for my next guest, which is obviously you. The question for my last guest, who was Charlie Frye, was, what would be a new plot in Magic, or maybe something that we've never played with as Magic would be a fun thing to add as a plot with Magic? I know it's one of those loaded questions, but that's what Charlie wanted to know. So, what do you think?
A new plot in Magic. I'm gonna take this from the close-up point of view.
Sure.
So I'm going to take this from the point of view of close-up Magic, and I think that the way that a lot of creators could start looking at things is taking concepts that are used in illusions, taking concepts that are used in stage shows that you wouldn't normally use in close-up, and bring it into a close-up environment. And the perfect example of that is somebody like Shim Lim, who started using black art. Mm-hmm. And for many, many years, black art was really only used on stage. Occasionally, you had the odd thing or two. Henry Evans springs to mind, but generally, as a rule, it was all stage illusionists, and it was people that worked on stage. And then Shin Lim said, well, you know what? I think this is going to work on, and we all know how Shin went with that, right? So I think that there's other stuff out there. There's other concepts that are used in illusions that we can do close up. And I think the problem is most people who do illusion shows they don't really do that much close-up because they're too busy running around putting girls in boxes. There's the odd person that does. David Penn is a perfect example of somebody who goes and does illusion shows and then he does close-up. And when he came up with his clear mystery box type thing, he was using illusion principles in that to make that work. He took something that is designed to work in an illusion and he brought it into the close-up environment. And I think that somebody who's got a sound knowledge of using illusions and the principles behind illusions could take that and bring it into a close-up environment and create something that's completely different.
Love it, love it, love it. And you guys too. I'd love for you to hear your feedback and comments, in the comments below. Let us know, like, if you had some thoughts too, to the question of the week about creating new plots in Magic. I think it's a great idea, yeah, because a lot of people are so uber focused on like card tricks or coin tricks. They're so set in their ways with this kind of stuff that they don't think about the things outside of that genre of Magic. So great input. Thank you, Craig. Appreciate it. And it's now your turn, Mr. Craig Petty, to pass along your question of the week to my next guest, who we don't know who it is just yet. But if you can ask a question to my next guest, whatever it is, it could be serious, it could be fun, it could be about magic, it could be about life. What would you want to ask my next guest? And you guys can answer this question too. But Craig Petty, what's your question of the week?
Let's stick to what I was just mentioning before. So we mentioned about Shin. Shin Lim took black art, which was just really, for many, many years, nobody ever used black art outside of a stage show. It was, this isn't going to work, this isn't going to work. And then Shin becomes one of the most famous magicians of all time by using that principle within his act. So my question is, what do you think is the next principle that people have forgotten about or decided that's not workable anymore in a close-up environment that can be brought into a close-up environment to catapult the person who uses it to mega stardom like Shin Lim did? What is that next principle that we don't see or we don't think works that we can, that somebody can actually bring in and prove everybody wrong?
That's a damn good question. I really, really like that question. It's got me thinking already, so I like that a lot. Yeah, so I'll be sure to let you know what their response is to your question, obviously, because I'm sure you would be interested. And again, you guys, feel free to join in on the combo too. In the comments, post your thoughts on that as well. So that officially is Craig Petty's question of the week. All right, guys, I think we're going to wrap it up now. Big thank you to Craig Petty. It is after midnight in the UK, so Craig, thank you, man, for hanging out and for the time and not going to sleep.
No problem. Thanks very much for having me. And seriously, guys, everybody who's watching this, if you have any questions at all on the Visible project or any questions at all on the routines or the skill level or just any questions about Invisible decks, drop them in on this video and I will jump on here and I will answer any questions that you guys have got. No problem at all.
Very cool. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Turn on those notifications. It's so easy. Just hit the little bell and you are good to go. So when we pop up with more info like this, more magic tricks, and more amazing people like Craig Petty, you will be the first to know about it. All right? All right. So for me and Craig Petty, you guys have a great rest of your day, great rest of your night, or just have a great one. So Craig, thank you again, and we will catch you guys all next time. See ya. Get out of here. Go. Go. Okay, bye.